With the anniversary of January 6th just around the corner, the media is cranking it into full gear, claiming that not only did Donald Trump stage an insurrection, he staged a military coup. He failed, but the conspiracy is ongoing, and Donald Trump, in fact, is planning the next coup. The Atlantic says Trump's next coup has already begun. Shocking, I know. What's more shocking is that according to polls, the American people prefer Donald Trump's insurrection, military coup, an attempt to subvert democracy over the Democratic Party, over Joe Biden, and in the House, over the Democrats. Republicans are expected to win in the midterms. Maybe not. We'll see. I know historically, this is what's expected to happen. It's the president's first term, and there's a shift in the House. But again, we'll see. Hard to make predictions this far out. But the polls right now show people favor Republicans, independents especially, favor Republicans, and regular people in the polls favor Donald Trump, I think by like 5 points. Now, if we track alongside the narrative from the mainstream media, this means regular Americans would prefer to vote for a guy who tried to steal an election via military coup and insurrection, as opposed to Joe Biden, the man who valiantly stood up and staved off the end of American democracy. The reality is, it's an absurd narrative. Donald Trump did not stage an insurrection, and a new story has come out basically proving the insurrection narrative is false. Apparently, Donald Trump had ordered secret shoot-to-kill commandos to protect Mike Pence. Does not sound like Trump was trying to stage an insurrection or anything like that. In fact, it sounds like quite the opposite. And actually, it was only a week or so ago, we heard other news in leaked communications, or I shouldn't say leaked, but published private communications from Trump administration officials and people sending messages to then Chief of Staff Mark Meadows. They were saying, tell Donald Trump to call this out and stop this. And Donald Trump did. Trump came out and said, go home peacefully. We can't have this. The Democrats are in shambles, the Democratic Party. Democrats are retiring in massive numbers. We're up to 24 Democrats announcing their retirement. And to be fair, some of these people are really old. And if I were to be honest, I think many more should be retiring. But the age of these individuals and just the mass retirements says to me the Democratic Party is in shambles. The polls show people favor Republicans. The narrative from the establishment media is insane and people aren't buying it anymore. Joe Rogan is getting 3 or 4 times the views that any one of these mainstream political pundits. Regular people are saying no, and boy, you could say this is call for optimism. A lot of people want to say I'm too pessimistic, but maybe what we're seeing now is regular people are waking up. They are realizing the lies from the mainstream media are just that, lies. And they are saying, I just want my life back. Protests across the country, protests in Europe, very serious protests in Australia. People are sick of the COVID lockdowns. Meanwhile, Ocasio-Cortez parties it up in Florida with no mask, exposing the hypocrisy of the Democrats for all to see. And you know what? It seems to be working. This is an individual who's championed mask mandates, who's defended a governor who's pushed forth vaccine mandates to a certain degree, not as harsh as the big cities, but statewide, yeah. Mask or vax, the governor calls it, and AOC defends that. Then she parties in Miami where Ron DeSantis, the Republican, gives people, well, I shouldn't even say gives people, but he doesn't encroach upon people's individual liberties. We can see through the lies. I don't think the Republicans are the answer. I think voting locally and getting involved in the primaries is a path forward, but we'll see. Republicans winning the midterms is no guarantee anything changes. But let's read the news, and I'll talk to you about what the media is saying about Trump's coup, and I will show you very definitively that Americans would prefer the coup master and insurrectionist over Joe Biden. In the story from the Daily Mail, Biden begins 2022 5 points behind Donald Trump. Amazing. Before we get started, head over to timcast.com and become a member in order to support our fierce and independent journalism. We now have, I think, like 31 or 32 employees, and it's only possible because you guys become members And that supports all of the work we do. As a member, you'll get access to exclusive members-only segments from the Timcast IRL podcast, as well as our other shows like Tales from the Inverted World and Pop Culture Crisis. But more importantly, you're supporting all the journalists who are writing the news, fact-checking, and trying to bring you true and honest information to the best of our abilities. But don't forget, like this video, subscribe to this channel, share this show right now. Take the URL, post it wherever you can. All the work we do is organically driven. We have no marketing. Maybe we should change that. For the time being, you guys are our only opportunity to challenge the mainstream media. If you really do think we do a good job, share this video, share our other content, and become a member at timcast.com. From the Daily Mail, they report, President Joe Biden returned to a snowy Washington on Monday to find that he starts the new year much as he ended the last one, behind in the polls. Not only do his personal approval ratings remain in the doldrums, but he would lose a general election to former President Donald Trump by almost 5 points. And that's the aggregate. According to the latest polls, Biden and his aides have repeatedly claimed the 79-year-old plans to run again in 2024, which would mean he would be 86 if he completed his second term. But an average of polls maintained by Real Clear Politics shows Trump leading Biden by 4.8 percentage points in a hypothetical matchup. Now, what you need to understand is that if those polls track true in a general election, 4.8 percentage points is massive. I mean, it is massive. What people need to understand about landslides in U.S. politics is that it typically doesn't look the way you'd think it was. People think landslide means you have 100 million voters and 80 million vote for one guy. No, that's not how landslides have worked in this country. The past landslides we saw, I think Nixon had one and Reagan had one. It was actually relatively close, but not really. I think it was like 10 points or around 10 points. And most of the states were fairly evenly split. But because of the way the Electoral College works, the overwhelming majority of electoral votes went to one of these two candidates, which means you can have a very seriously divided nation almost evenly, but with 5 percentage points, you could be looking at a very big swing. I don't think that would be in historical territory like we saw with Reagan or Nixon, but it would be massive. They're going to say the polls included in the range were conducted in the 6 weeks up to December 19th and show that on average, about 46% of voters back the former president compared to just 41.2% who say they would vote for Biden. It shows the challenge facing Biden as his administration reels from a fresh wave of COVID-19 cases caused by the Omicron variant, consumer worries about surging inflation, and the collapse of his domestic spending plans. Well, far be it from me to keep you from the data, my friends. We got this from Real Clear Politics. General election, Trump v. Biden. Now, this may actually be relatively pointless to bring up because there's no presidential election. There's no president, not for several years. And whether or not people like Trump or Biden, I don't think has any real political bearings unless there's going to be an election literally right now. But it does show you where the American psyche is at. And when you take a look at November to December 17th to 19th, you take a look at these past few weeks, we can see Trump favored. Now, Rasmussen, wow, they have Trump up 13 points. Okay. Rasmussen in September had Trump up 10 points. Then previously had him up 6. But we can take a look at like Wall Street Journal. They actually show Biden up 1 point. The Wall Street Journal showed him up 1 point as well. It's not all just good for Trump. But USA Today, +4, Harvard Harris, +3, Insider Advantage, +8. These are not right-wing publications. Emerson, Trump, +2. That's incredible. People like Trump more than they like Joe Biden. And there was previous polling that showed if the American people had access to the Hunter Biden laptop story, then I think it was like 5 to 7% said they would have voted for Donald Trump instead, and that would have swung the election in Trump's favor. But of course, big tech colluding with Democrats to try and make sure Trump can't win. What do you expect? Now, let me show you the media narrative, because I want to hammer home what this means. I already showed you the first article about Trump's plan for a coup. The Atlantic reports, and this is just from last September, Trump's plan for a coup are now public. Some of the plots to overturn the election happened in secret, but don't forget the ones that unfolded in open. Okay, there's one story. How about this one from the Huffington Post? This is from today. Trump tried a coup in plain sight and has so far gotten away with it. Okay, let's read this one from Newsweek. We are on the way to a right-wing coup, the CIA director privately warned. The Capitol riot, road to January 6th, Newsweek says. Do you know what this means? If this is the narrative for the mainstream media, and this is the messaging going out to the American people, and in the polls, the American people say, yeah, that guy you accused of staging a military coup, we'd rather vote for him. Or I should put it simply, there are more people who support Donald Trump despite the narrative from the media that he is staging a coup. Just think about that for 2 seconds. That means, in the view of the left and those who genuinely believe an insurrection occurred, you must naturally conclude the American people prefer the insurrection over Joe Biden. Well, because The Atlantic said that Donald Trump is already staging his next coup. It's already begun. Trump's next coup has already begun. If you live in this world, that must be your view of things, right? Or are they lying? Because let's break it down. How many people do you think, would you ask a Democrat who believes Trump staged an insurrection or a coup, what do you think they're going to say if you go to them and say, well, you know that according to the Real Clear Politics aggregate, Trump is favored more in the polls than Biden? You think they'll accept that? No. When it comes to the narrative around Trump's polling, all of a sudden, no one says insurrection. All of a sudden, it's like, well, you know, Trump is favored. No. Be honest. You guys say this is an insurrection and a coup. And if that's Trump, then people favor that coup, don't they? Don't they? Yes, say it. I want to hear the left admit it. That everything they're saying about a military coup, people would want. No, they don't want to admit that. They don't want to admit that they are so unpopular, people prefer what happened on January 6th. Now, I don't like what happened on January 6th, and I think it's ridiculous that there is this attempt at saying there's no middle ground between who cares about January 6th and it was the worst in the world. We talk about that all the time. January 6th was bad. People tried storming into the tunnel. Some people were let in, and it shouldn't have happened, and the people who were violent should be prosecuted. I don't like what happened on January 6th. I think it was a bad thing. But if you're going to come out and claim that Donald Trump was pushing this, now most people know it's not true. And let's be real. When I say in the title and everything that people prefer the insurrection, I'm speaking from the perspective of the left to make a point. Genuinely, I don't believe the American people think a coup actually happened or there was an insurrection. I think the media is just lying. Here we go, The Hill. Nearly a year after January 6th, U.S. democracy remains perilously fragile. Why is it that all of these people who claim that democracy is ending, what they are just complaining about Republicans winning? To the Democrats, Republicans winning elections means democracy is dying. No, that actually would mean democracy is working, right? Democratic Republic, people are moving forward. Oh, man. Well, I'll tell you this. I got more. Let me see if I can get this one up from the Inquirer. Is the smoking gun in Trump's January 6th attempt at a coup hiding in plain sight? From The Nation, the uncanny resemblance of the beer hall putsch and the January 6th insurrection. If 1920s Germany could punish Hitler for leading a coup attempt, why can't America go after Trump? From yesterday. So I'd like to just stress, if you are someone who holds the worldview of the nation, you believe the world is this, that Donald Trump staged a coup that is an uncanny resemblance to the beer hall putsch, then you need to recognize the American people support that. And that must be a terrifying world to live in. You're losing. Trump is winning. And Trump's not even announced he's running yet, though most people think he will be running. Oh, my friends, there's more. From Politico. It's only gotten worse, the long shadow of the night that broke the House. For most Democrats, the biggest affront wasn't even the violence by Donald Trump's supporters. It was the votes more than 140 of their GOP colleagues took afterward. Why? Could it be that the GOP is actually representing their constituents? They don't think it was a military coup and the Democrats are actually the bad guys here? Has that ever occurred to these people that they're the bad guys? It's like that skit where the two Nazis are like, are we the baddies? Yeah, maybe you are. Yeah, you're the baddies. All right. Here we go. Here's the new narrative. From The Guardian. Opinion, U.S. Capitol attack. The risk of a coup in the next U.S. election is greater now than it ever was under Trump. Oh, I love it. These people are insane. But you know what? It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if they're sane or insane. What matters is the political worldview in this country is fractured to such a degree, there's no bridging the gap. You know, I talked about over the past several years, the gap was getting bigger. It was getting bigger. Yeah, well, now it's two completely different nations. And I'm not kidding. The Democrats say democracy will end if Republicans win. The American people say we prefer Donald Trump. So if these views can't coexist within the same system, the Democrats have genuinely lost the plot and live in crackpot world. And that's why when you look at, quote unquote, the right, you end up with moderates, libertarians, post-liberals, center-left liberals, social liberals, conservatives, and even, to a certain extent, the far right, traditional conservatives and the ultra-religious, all seemingly in agreement on these issues, even though they completely disagree on policy. It's because the Democratic Party is a cult. Wokeness, it's a cult. And they live in a crackpot world of insane narratives. Lawrence Tribe says Republicans are busy undermining the next election, but giving up on democracy isn't an option. We must fight back, and here's how. Only free and fair elections in which the loser abides by the result stand between each of us and life at the mercy of a despotic regime. I don't think it's Republicans who are taking away people's individual liberties. Isn't it funny that the Democrats keep saying that the Republicans are the evil ones, and it's the Democrats that are taking away people's rights and locking them in their homes? Look, if that's the world you want to live in, you're free to do so. Oh, it gets better. From The Guardian. Man. U.S. could be under right-wing dictator by 2030, Canadian professor warns. Canadian political scientist warns in op-ed of Trumpist threat to American democracy and possible effect on northern neighbor. Man, the narrative, it just never seems to go away. From CNBC, Biden disapproval hits new high as voters give him bad grades on economy. New CNBC Change poll says. Why don't these polls, these mainstream media companies that often push out these narratives of insurrection, why don't they address the fact that people hate Joe Biden? Not everybody, but a lot of people. They're going to report President Joe Biden's overall disapproval ratings reached a new high in December as more voters signaled their unhappiness with his handling of the economy in the COVID pandemic. Results from a CNBC Change research poll show 60% of respondents said they disapprove of Biden's handling of the economy as he nears the conclusion of his first year in office. A 55% majority of survey respondents also signaled disapproval of his leadership during the pandemic, an area in which he previously excelled. This is where we're at. So if the mainstream media is correct, the American people are faced with the possibility of a right-wing dictator, a military coup currently underway, and an insurrectionist in Donald Trump, and at the same time, they support that. Sure. The Democrats, you've lost. And maybe in their crazy crackpot world, it really is the end of democracy, but the reality is they've just lost it. From Fox News, surge in House Democratic 2022 retirement announcements as 2021 comes to a close. House GOP leader Kevin McCarthy in August predicted the current wave of Democratic retirement announcements. Well, let's be fair. A lot of these Democrats are really old. We have this story from The Hill. Rep. Bobby Rush becomes latest House Democrat not seeking re-election. Rush said Monday he will not seek re-election after 15 terms in Congress. 15 terms. Rush told the Chicago Sun-Times he made the decision in the past several weeks and that it was a result of a conversation he had with his grandson. I don't want my grandchildren to know me from a television news clip or something they read in a newspaper. I want them to know me on an intimate level, know something about me, and I want to know something about them. I don't want to be a historical figure to my grandchildren. The Illinois Democrat said he plans to remain active in his ministry and use his life story and experiences to inspire young people. Rush co-founded the Illinois chapter of the Black Panthers, becoming acting chairman following the killings of Fred Hampton and Mark Clark in a police raid in December 1969. His career has been marked by a focus on civil rights and racial injustice. He is 75 years old and has served since 1993. He defeated, back then, Barack Obama in a 2000 Democratic primary for the state's 1st congressional district. He is the 24th House Democrat to not seek re-election in 2022. Republicans only need to flip 5 seats to win the majority. Rush will make an announcement Tuesday on his future plans, his office announced. Now, Republicans could win based on this alone. We don't know for sure. We don't know exactly where people will end up voting or who they'll end up voting for, but I'll show you this. We have this from Ballotopedia. 14 seats held by Democrats and 20 held by Republicans are up for a regular election in 2022. The map shows what seats are up for re-election and the incumbent ahead of the election. So we got a lot of states here. There are more Republican more Republican seats that are up for re-election, and that means Republicans are at a disadvantage. However, based on current polling trends, it would seem that that might not matter. Republicans need to win. They need to hold 20 states and win one Democrat state. Now, they could theoretically lose Democrats could lose in, say, Colorado. I don't know for sure. Arizona could absolutely flip Republican. I think it's entirely a possibility. Now, of course, California, Illinois, New York, Washington, Oregon, I don't see any of these states changing. So it's going to be tough because Republicans, this is their race to lose. We'll see. Now, as for the House and historic party control, over the past several years, Republicans have been in control of, I believe this is the U.S. House. This is the Senate. And now it's completely even. And it was in 2018, we saw the House flipped. The Senate has dropped evenly. So interestingly, it has shifted in favor of Democrats over the past few years. But this could just be because of Donald Trump. It could be that because of Barack Obama, we saw Republicans take the House, and the Republicans held the Senate since Obama's, I believe this is his first term, into a second term. Republicans lost it, likely due to Donald Trump. This could mean that we're going to see a standard historical shift, nothing spectacular, just a historical shift. Joe Biden is president. There's a lot of problems, so people say they're going to vote the other way. 538 says, why the president's party almost always has a bid midterm. They say history certainly seems adamant that they will win the national popular vote for the U.S. House and gain seats there, although their prospects in the Senate are less certain. But as with any rule, there are exceptions. And some theories for why the midterm curse exists may contain some hints that Democrats may be able to hold their losses to a minimum. At this point, though, history isn't on the Democrat side. It's really interesting. They ask, are Republicans really a lock to sweep the 2022 midterms? And they go on to say that since World War II, the president's party has consistently gotten a lower share of the national House popular vote in the midterm than in the prior presidential election. Well, if that's anything to go off of, then we need to say this. The Democrats did maintain control of the House in 2020, but they lost some key areas. Southern Texas, Miami, for instance. Nobody thought Miami would turn Republican. This was safe Democrat territory. That's how bad it was. But it wasn't enough. Why? Donald Trump. Donald Trump mobilized people against the Republicans. If Donald Trump didn't seek re-election and it was some other Republican, I think it's fair to say the Democrats would not have won. Republicans would control everything. However, it is fair to point out Donald Trump also did get a record number of votes for a sitting president. He didn't beat Joe Biden, but he got a massive number. I think he got over 10 million more votes this time around. So it may be that Trump really did mobilize people for the Republicans, and that's the only reason they did so well in the House. It's hard to know for sure. I can say that it's looking really, really bad for Democrats. And it's not just about history either. I bring that up because I think it's fair to say that it could just be redistricting and a historical trend. It could actually be, rising gas price projections complicate Biden's horizon. It could very well be that people want a return to normal. They're tired of the lockdowns. They're tired of being told they can't go outside. They're tired of saying they can't go to the movies. They're tired of being told they have to wear masks for 2 seconds as they walk into the restaurant, take them off when they sit down, and then walk out without putting them back on, which seems to make literally no sense for anybody. I think the Democrats keep pushing, keep demanding more, and it's going to result in people saying, I'm mad as hell and I'm not going to take it anymore. Republicans win. But there is an alternate scenario from timcast.com. About half of both Republicans and Democrats view the other side as enemies that threaten their entire way of life. The CBS News YouGov survey was focused on opinions surrounding the events that took place on January 6th. When asked about their feelings towards people in the other party, 43% of Democrats and 48% of Republicans view the other side as enemies who threaten their entire way of life. The respondents were asked to classify the other side as their enemy or political opposition. When polled about political violence, About a quarter of Americans cited gun policies, abortion policies, civil rights, labor issues, and even vaccine and coronavirus policies as reasons that they may support it. Quote, among liberals and Democrats, about 4 in 10 say civil rights and equality issues are important enough that violence might be justified over them. And a quarter name labor issues and abortion policies. For the right, that is, conservatives and Republicans, it's more likely to be gun policies and election results, with about 4 in 10 saying force might be justified on these issues. The pollsters found that within each group, those who would justify violence tend to be younger and somewhat more ideologically extreme. That is, identifying as very liberal or conservative. It's important to note that they also report being less likely to vote, which may reflect an inclination to seek political outcomes by other less traditional means. Let me expand upon that and explain to you why this is really bad. These young people, they are more ideologically extreme. They're going to get older. When they're in their 40s, their views aren't going to change for the most part. In fact, they could become more extreme. As people get older, they tend to become more political. So if you have, let's put it this way, Gen X, very similar in politics to each other, both Democrat and Republican, but further apart than, say, boomers. Millennials, even further apart. You can see that as the new generation comes in, the distance between both sides will increase. When Gen Xers age out of the workforce and then eventually retire and pass on, millennials will be in charge of everything, and they're more ideologically opposed to each other. Gen Z will be more ideologically opposed to each other, and then the next generation, which is what Generation Alpha, I think it's called, are going to be even further apart. This means it has nothing to do with recruitment. It has nothing to do with media. It has nothing to do with what I'm telling you right now. It has everything to do with how kids are being raised by the older generation. And if Republicans can stop the schools from indoctrinating kids, then it may actually start to pull back. The left, younger generation, may start to become less ideologically extreme. But if these leftist institutions, these schools and these teachers keep indoctrinating kids, we are going to see extreme hyperpolarization as a result of an aging population, not as a result of recruitment. This is what people don't understand. If young people are not taught your values and the things you care about, be it politics or, riding a bike, then there will be no culture around that. You can take a look at why certain institutions die off, why certain sports die off. I made this point to Steve Bannon. I thought it was kind of funny. Rollerblading is a good example. It was substantially more popular than any action sport, even today, in the 90s. Rollerblading was huge. It was massive. And then all of a sudden, it started to fade away. It started to die off, and now there's almost no rollerblading culture. Why is that? They did not inspire kids. So as they got older, slowly started quitting because it's an intensive sport, started having families and getting jobs, who was there to carry on that culture? No one. But skateboarding picked up. Kids were inspired to skateboard. Skateboarding was seen as cooler for whatever reason. They chose to do that. And now there is a massive skateboarding industry that is growing by the day. It's becoming really corporate, but it's a really good example. So take a look now at the United States and politics, and that same principle applies. If conservatives keep putting their children in institutionalized learning facilities where their kids will be indoctrinated, then conservative values will disappear. But conservatives have more kids than liberals. If conservatives in rural areas pass down their values, send their kids to, say, church, Sunday school, or just homeschool them, then they will not become leftist. They will carry on the traditions and values and way of life of conservatives. The left, having less children but indoctrinating kids at schools, will be able to maintain some ideological polarization as well. So long as these areas, cities and rural areas, are separated, you are going to see more and more pronounced hyperpolarization. Most of the people who watch my videos and Timcast IRL are millennials, mostly millennial males. Y'all need to have families and have kids. And I know, criticize me. I need to do the same thing. I totally get it. Y'all need to do that. Because right now, it's not enough just to watch videos like this. You are probably watching these videos because you already had an inclination in this direction. Now, there certainly are a lot of people who are like, wow, my eyes have been opened by watching independent media. Sure. But that's the rarity. Most people already agree with these values. And so when they see the stories, they're like, makes sense to me. And that's why many leftists can't be broken out of their cult. Their entire brain is hardwired from indoctrination and from the values given to them by their parents. They'll never let it go. There's no amount of data you can give to them. So while we can talk about something like mass formation psychosis and say that people are going insane, it's important to point out that many people were raised insane. I don't mean literally insane. I just mean they were raised with these worldviews and they won't drop them. You can't convince them. Some people can be changed. Some people can be convinced. And I feel like the recruitment phase, for the most part, is over. Though there is still a decent amount of people in the middle who aren't really paying attention and can be convinced. Most people who are ideological are as ideological as they're going to be. They're going to instill those values in the next generation, be it through schools or through their family. And those kids will grow up not being polarized by the media, not being polarized by academia, but just living in that world. They will then see the other, the conservatives or whatever, and say they are so wrong and so different from me, I could never reconcile with them. It would be insane. Imagine if someone came to you and said, the sky is green, and you'd say the sky is blue. And all you're really arguing is semantics, because they certainly see the same sky as you, but they use a different word for it. You would then be like, these people are nuts. The sky is not green. The sky is blue. And they'd be like, this person's insane. The sky's clearly green. Not understanding they're referring to the same concept by a different word. That's all that matters. Then they would just say, you're nuts. The reason I bring that part up is because when we're talking about what's going on with the wokeness and the left, is that the woke left and the right actually agree on so much, but they use different words to describe them. The left uses racism to mean something completely different. And so by doing that, the right doesn't understand what they're talking about. And when the right says racism in the traditional sense, the left is like, how does that apply to what we're talking about? Different languages. And thus, there we go. Imagine there are two individuals who meet in an open field. They're both armed. They speak different languages. And they don't understand each other's cultures or way of life, and they fear each other. Then they start trying to talk, and they can't understand each other. It's a recipe for disaster. Not always. Depends on the willingness to fight. But some people might just say, I don't trust you, I don't like you, and the way you talk sounds weird, and you'll probably hurt me. And there you go. Fighting breaks out. I don't know exactly how it will play out, but I can say, according to the media, the American people favor insurrection. Take that as however you want to take it. Or we can just flat out say the mainstream media is lying about this, and the American people don't want an insurrection. It's just that, well, it wasn't one. I'll leave it there. Next segment's coming up tonight at 8 p.m. over at youtube.com/TimCastIRL. Thanks for hanging out. We'll see you all then.